a lot of fresh interest in electric cars because of rising gasoline prices. But did you know that EV rapid charging costs are soaring too? Many people forget that electricity costs are rising. So whether you charge your EV at home or at a public charging station, the cost is rising and will continue to rise. Today, I'm talking about soaring charging costs, how often EVs run out of juice and break down on the road, and what EV owners can do if this ever happens. I'll also share tips on how to prevent your EV battery from degrading prematurely and why you can't install solar panels on your EV, and also why regenerative braking can't fully charge an electric car. EV charging generally has been cheaper than filling up a car with gasoline or diesel, but charging costs are rising, and it's all over the map. That's because of the energy crisis. Electricity rates have jumped because of a surge in natural gas prices. The average residential electricity rate spiked 8% in January compared to last year. That was the largest annual increase in 10 years. Mind you, summer is here now, which means your monthly bill will rise due to air conditioning, especially if you live in hotter states. In Florida, Hawaii, Illinois, and New York, electricity rates went up 15%. A typical electric sedan can go 3 to 4 miles for every kilowatt hours. Needless to say, electric trucks and SUVs get less. If you were to compare an EV to a 25 mile per gallon car, you could think of 7 kilowatt hours like being 1 gallon of gasoline. Right now, the most cost-effective way of charging your EV is at home. That's because residential electricity rates can be much lower than their public charger counterparts, which can be 2 to 4 times higher. But electricity prices are going up, not only across the country, but also across the world. Specific at-home charging costs really depend on your location, your energy supplier, and the energy plan you're presently on. But lower charging costs aren't the only benefit of at-home EV charging. It's also more convenient. More EVs driving on the roads could mean more time wasted waiting to charge at a public station. At home, all you got to do is plug in your EV to the home charger, and you're free to do other things at home. Did you know that an EV charger is also a plus in the appraisal value of a house? As more and more people are going to buy electric vehicles, buyers will prefer houses with an EV charger unit already installed. And lastly, most home EV chargers are compatible with a wide number of EV car manufacturers. So if your household has multiple cars, chances are your unit can charge most, if not all of them. Of course, if you only have one unit, then you might need to coordinate who gets it first. While EV charging prices are soaring, some believe the purchase price of an EV might come down in the near future, but only assuming we don't face problems with EV battery shortages. EV batteries are expensive to make. This is why EVs are more expensive compared to their gasoline-powered counterparts. And a high level of investment is needed to transform existing factory production to meet the demand for electric vehicles. But with charging costs increasing, some aren't charging their EVs as much as they should. As you can imagine, that's causing some problems, like EVs running out of juice in the middle of the highway. One experienced tow truck driver estimated that 1 out of every 5 cars stranded on the road were electric cars that ran out of juice, where the other 4 were traditional combustion engine cars that ran out of gas. Typically, the EV owners ran out because they forgot to charge their car, or they were driving too far between charges. Last year, there was a poll that was conducted. Believe it or not, the average American believed that 65% of EV breakdowns are caused by EVs running out of juice. Now you can see why so many have range anxiety. But here's the truth of the matter. It turns out that in reality, only 4% of EV breakdowns are due to batteries gone flat. The majority of reasons are usually the tires or other reasons. Compare that to combustion engine cars. According to AAA, about half of roadside assistance calls each year are from drivers who just ran out of gasoline. So what should you do if this nightmare happens to you with an electric car? Well, don't panic. Also, if you have roadside assistance like AAA, they can tow your car to the nearest charging station. Some of the AAA trucks carry an onboard fast charger that can add 10 miles of range in 30 minutes. Some people wonder if you can push an EV if it breaks down. Yes, in general, it is possible to push an EV, but you should only do it if you're in a safe area. Basically, the motor of an EV engages when power is applied. When no power is applied, the motor is free to rotate, and any rotation gets sent backwards to charge the batteries. But here's the thing. EVs typically weigh more than traditional cars, so pushing it will be harder than pushing a standard car. So, I'd recommend always having a backup plan if your EV stops working, just to be on the safe side. Let's say the nearest charging station is 5 miles away. Are you really going to push your EV all that way? I don't think so. That's why I believe roadside assistance is a good thing to have in general. And I'm not being paid to say this either. Did you know that many roadside assistance providers cover EVs under their standard breakdown policies? This means normally you shouldn't have to pay extra because you have an electric and not a gas or diesel vehicle. And if all else fails, you can opt to call a tow truck. You can also download a charging network app to locate charging stations across the country. And using filters, you can even search for the specific type of charger you need. Ideally, you should be looking for a rapid charging point that can boost your battery with 60 to 80 miles of range in 1 hour. It's important that you know your mileage limit before you leave for a long journey. That will help you avoid future breakdowns. And where can you find this limit? Manufacturers will always state your EV's estimated range. Knowing your vehicle's range ahead of time can help you avoid getting caught with a dead battery. Remember though, your vehicle's range can be affected by other things like running the car's heater or air conditioning, or even how fast you drive. So what you should do if you're on the road and notice your EV is running low on battery. First, drive slower. Also, turn off any auxiliary features inside the car to keep hold of its energy as long as possible. When it comes to EV batteries in general, don't ever charge it all the way to 100%. It's not a good idea. In fact, even car brands will caution you about this. The average EV has a battery management system inside. This system prevents the car from being charged and discharged at the extreme state of charge. It's true, technically, having your battery fully charged will give you the maximum operating time, but going to this frequently will inevitably reduce the battery's ability to retain a charge over time. It'll also reduce the overall lifespan of your battery. It's like a laptop. Laptops lose battery capacity if they're plugged in all the time. General rule of thumb is to charge at 80% at most. Of course, here and there you might have an occasional longer trip planned and you're getting range anxiety. It might be okay to charge it to the max for those one-off trips. What's the lowest recommended battery level you should reach before recharging? With your EV, it's best to let the capacity run down to 20% or even 10% before you charge it back up. How does this compare with smartphone batteries? Well, the fundamentals of a smartphone battery and EV battery are pretty much the same, but the significant difference is in how they're charged or discharged. Smartphone batteries don't have this built-in charging buffer like EVs do. This means you can never really drain to a 20% or charge them to a true 100%. One reason is because battery degradation isn't as crucial when it comes to a smartphone. Also, the average American replaces their smartphone every 3 years. Consider, too, that when they do replace their phone, it's a much lower purchase price cost than buying an EV car. Did you know that many EV makers provide a standard 8-year or 100,000-mile battery warranty? This warranty will cover a certain amount of battery degradation during that time. Since you shouldn't charge your EV to 100%, should you charge it every night? Many people have range anxiety with a fear that the EV battery will run out on them. Because of this, they charge their car every night just to be safe. The same as they charge their cell phone by the nightstand every single night. But look, with cars, this really isn't necessary. In fact, it can damage your car's battery. The reason is repeatedly charging and discharging causes lithium-ion batteries to degrade over time. So imagine what charging at 365 days a year every year would do to it. Every time a battery gets charged, that charging cycle puts stress on the battery. And that applies whether you're adding 5% or 55% of the charge. This is another reason why you should get familiar with your EV's driving range. It'll help you know how often to charge your battery and for how long. Ever wonder why we don't see solar panels on the roof of EVs? If you were to put solar panels on an EV, they can convert just 15 to 20% of the energy coming from the sun. Hypothetically, these solar panels would only give you about 3 miles of energy in 1 hour of charging. So it's just not worth it. And don't forget the sky-high cost of installing solar panels. We're talking about an extra $6,000, and that doesn't even include maintenance costs. And don't forget that EVs are already much heavier than standard combustion engines, so adding solar panels on top of that isn't such a smart idea. Battery electric vehicles and hybrid started popping up in the early part of the 21st century. Along with them came regenerative braking technology. Regenerative braking allows an EV to transform the kinetic energy of the car into electrical energy, and then that energy is used to recharge your car's battery while you're on the road. When you take your foot off the accelerator, the regenerative braking system kicks in. Some people wonder if regenerative braking can sufficiently and regularly charge your EV. Well, the short answer is no. The point of a regenerative braking system isn't about fully charging your EV. This system doesn't make EVs more efficient per se. It just makes them less inefficient, and it doesn't replace your vehicle's traditional brakes either. A regenerative braking system helps your car to slow down, but eventually you'll need to press the brake pedal to get the vehicle to come to a complete or even sudden stop. For most Americans, transportation costs are the second largest expense after your house. If you were to get rid of your gasoline-powered car and go electric, you could save an average of $770 a year on fuel cost savings alone. But you need to consider a few things, like rising electricity costs and the cost of an electric vehicle itself. Since most EVs on the market have a higher purchase cost than combustion engine vehicles, you'll be spending more. Now, there are some federal and state incentives and programs that can help reduce the cost difference. I'm talking about tax credits and rebates, so you should check what the federal, state, and local electric car tax credits are. In general, there's less maintenance required for an EV. EVs have significantly fewer moving parts than gasoline-powered ones. They also need less maintenance. For example, this means no oil changes, timing belts, fuel filters, or mufflers to replace. That said, you need to balance that out with other disadvantages. For instance, if you do need to replace or repair the EV battery, well, the battery is the most expensive component of an EV. So, you better hope the cause of damage allows you to be covered under the car's warranty. Otherwise, it will be super expensive. But now, you tell me, do you think electricity costs will rise to the point where charging your EV will be as high as pumping gas? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.